Poland, a nation that has risen, fallen, and risen again countless times throughout history, partitioned, conquered, yet never truly erased. But who are the Poles? Where did they truly come from? For centuries, historians debated this question. Some argued Poles had always lived in these lands, others insisted they migrated from elsewhere. The truth remained hidden, buried in the soil alongside the remains of Poland's ancient inhabitants. In 2025, scientists published what would become one of the most shocking genetic studies in European history. After analysing over 550 ancient genomes, they discovered something extraordinary. The population replacement that created modern Poland was more dramatic than anyone imagined. Over 80% of the ancestry in Poland today comes from a massive migration that happened between the 6th and 8th centuries AD. The people who lived in Poland during the Iron Age? They were almost completely replaced. Their genes vanished. The medieval Slavs who arrived weren't just neighbours learning a new language. They were an entirely different population. Today we're going to decode Polish DNA and reveal how one of history's greatest migrations created the Slavic people we know today. To understand Polish DNA, we need to go back nearly 5,000 years to the Bronze Age, when Poland's genetic foundation was first laid. Around 2900 BCE, something dramatic happened across Poland. A new culture appeared, the corded Ware culture, named after the distinctive rope pattern decorations on their pottery. According to research on the Upedia Poland Regional DNA Project, ancient DNA studies have showed that modern Poles are remarkably similar to the corded Ware people of the late Copper Age and early Bronze Age. These people were a hybrid of Proto-Indo-Europeans from the Pontic-Caspian steppe and local Neolithic farmers. The corded Ware people brought ancestry from the Yamnaya pastoralists, nomadic herders from the grasslands of Ukraine and southern Russia who had domesticated horses and invented wheeled vehicles. A 2020 study in Scientific Reports by Linderholm et al. Analysed corded Ware individuals from Poland and found that, maternally, the individuals are linked to earlier Neolithic lineages, whereas on the paternal side, a steppe ancestry is clearly visible. This tells us something crucial. Corded Ware wasn't a pure population migration, it was a mixing event. Men with steppe ancestry were having children with local farming women, creating a new hybrid population. The corded Ware culture brought Y chromosome haplogroup R1a to Poland. Today, R1a is the dominant paternal lineage among Poles, carried by approximately 57.5% of Polish men. According to Indo-European Connection research, R1a-Z 93Y DNA haplogroup originated in modern-day Carpathian Mountains region of southern Poland and western Ukraine. A 2020 study in PLOS One by Juras et al. Found genetic continuity from the late Neolithic corded Ware groups to Bronze Age Mieszanowicz and Trzciniec associated populations. What makes Poland unique is this genetic continuity from the Bronze Age forward. For the next 2,500 years, this population would develop and evolve. The genetic core remained stable, until everything changed in the 6th century AD. By the Roman Iron Age, around 0 to 400 AD, Poland was dominated by the Wielbark culture in the north and the Pliwos culture in the south. For decades these were associated with Germanic tribes like the Goths and Vandals, but who were these people genetically? A 2014 study in PLOS One by Juras et al., titled Ancient DNA Reveals Matrilineal Continuity in Present-Day Poland over the Last 2 Millennia, analysed 43 individuals from Roman Iron Age sites and found mitochondrial DNA sequences from both periods belong to haplogroups that are characteristic of contemporary West Eurasia. The study discovered genetic continuity in certain maternal lineages, but this was only part of the story. A massive 2023 study in genome biology by Stolarek et al. Analysed 474 individuals from 27 cemeteries, comparing Iron Age Wielbark people, 0 to 400 AD, with medieval age Slavic individuals, 1000 to 1400 AD. The results were shocking. The Wielbark people had Y chromosome haplogroup frequencies of I1, 41.3%, the most common Nordic haplogroup, R1a, only 8.6%. Medieval Slavic populations from the same region had completely different genetics. R1A, 57.5% now dominant. I1. Only 3.5% nearly disappeared. The study found close genetic affinities between the IA Reelbach, culture-associated individuals and contemporary to them and older northern European populations, meaning they were genetically similar to Scandinavians, not modern Poles, but medieval individuals showed a genetic shift between Iron Age and medieval age in Poland. This is the genetic smoking gun proving the Slavic migration theory. Something dramatic happened between these two periods. The legendary Jomsborg. This Scandinavian presence in Poland wasn't just ancient history, it continued into the Viking Age itself. Between the 9600s and 1043 AD, a legendary Viking fortress called Jomsborg stood on Polish soil. According to Norse sagas, it was built by Danish King Harald Bluetooth in the 9600s near the present-day town of Wolin, on the southeastern tip of the Isle of Wolin in northwestern Poland. This wasn't just any Viking settlement. Jomsborg was home to the Jomsvikings, an elite brotherhood of mercenary warriors who would fight for anyone willing to pay for their services. These weren't typical Viking raiders. They operated under a strict warrior code. Only men aged 18 to 50 could join. To become a Jomsviking, you had to defeat or kill a current member in combat. Women and children were forbidden in the fortress. They could not take women or children as prisoners in battle. No warrior could show fear or retreat. The Jomsvikings were legendary across the Viking world for their discipline and fighting prowess. They participated in major battles across Scandinavia, serving as mercenaries for kings and jarls. But here's what's fascinating from a genetic perspective. Jomsborg was a Scandinavian and Germanic outpost in increasingly Slavic lands. According to Karolina Kokora, director of Wolin's History Museum, Jomsborg was like a medieval New York on the Baltic, a bustling trading hub with a diverse population comprising Vikings, Germanic peoples and Slavs. In 2014, an 11-year-old Polish girl brought a box of old items to her teacher that included the Kerms and disc. A gold disc with Latin engravings referencing Harald Bluetooth and Jomsborg. This disc, believed to be part of a hoard found in Wolin in 1841, provides physical evidence that Jomsborg wasn't just a legend. Polish archaeologist Dr. Wojciech Filipowiak has discovered ramparts and a wooden pier near Wolin that could indicate the actual location of the Jomsborg stronghold at Srebrna Gora, Hangman Hill, north of the town. The fortress was destroyed in 1043 by King Magnus the Good of Norway, ending the Jomsvikings' reign. Jomsborg's existence is crucial for understanding Polish genetic history. Here was a major Viking stronghold operating in Poland during the 10th and early 11th centuries, the very end of that Iron Age period when Poland still had those Germanic-influenced populations with high frequencies of Scandinavian I1 haplogroups. But by the time Jomsborg fell in 1043, the Slavic transformation was already well underway. The Slavic migration that began in the 6th century had been ongoing for 400 to 500 years. The genetic landscape was shifting beneath the Vikings' feet. Jomsborg represents the last gasp of Scandinavian and Germanic presence in Poland before the region became overwhelmingly Slavic. It was an island of Nordic genetics in a sea of incoming Slavic settlers. Within a few centuries after Jomsborg's destruction, the genetic profile we saw earlier would be complete. R1, a dominance at 57.5%, I1 reduced to just 3.5%. The Jomsvikings and their Scandinavian kin would become genetic ghosts, their DNA overwhelmed by the Slavic tide. For over 200 years, historians debated, did Slavs migrate into Poland, or were local populations simply Slavicized through cultural diffusion? DNA has finally answered this question definitively. The 2025 breakthrough study. In 2025, an international team led by the Histogenes Consortium published the definitive study in Nature, titled Ancient DNA Connects Large-Scale Migration with the Spread of Slavs. The study analysed 555 ancient individuals, including 359 from Slavic contexts as early as the 7th century CE. Lead geneticist Joshua Gretzinger explained, while direct evidence from early Slavic core regions is still rare, our genetic results offer the first concrete clues to the formation of Slavic ancestry. pointing to a likely origin somewhere between the Dniester and Don rivers, a region stretching from southern Belarus to central Ukraine. 80% population replacement. The findings were unambiguous. Our data demonstrate large-scale population movement from Eastern Europe during the 6th to 8th centuries, replacing more than 80% of the local gene pool in Eastern Germany, Poland and Croatia. Over 80% replacement. This wasn't cultural diffusion, this was population replacement on a massive scale. The University of Warsaw summary stated, genetic results show that starting in the 6th and 7th centuries, the earlier inhabitants of these lands, descendants of peoples with strong ties to Northern Europe, and particularly Scandinavia, almost completely disappeared and were gradually replaced by newcomers from the East, who are closely related to modern Poles, Ukrainians, and Belarusians. The study analysed Poland's earliest known Slavic burials from Grodek on the Bug River, dating to the 6th to 7th centuries. The genetic analysis confirmed these individuals came from Eastern Europe, matching populations from the Ukraine-Belarus border region. Walter Pohl, senior author of the study, explained the Slavic migration represented a demic diffusion or grassroots movement, often in small groups or temporary alliances. The 2025 study found that genetic data indicate that migration was not limited to one gender. It appears to have involved entire families and communities integrating into the new environment, not just male warriors. This was families migrating, men, women, children, entire populations relocating from Eastern Europe into Poland. This explains why the genetic replacement was so complete. 6th century, first Slavic groups appear in Poland from the east. 7th century, the migration accelerates. Slavic settlements spread rapidly. The earlier populations either flee westward, die out, or are absorbed in small numbers. 8th to 9th centuries, the transformation is complete. Poland is now overwhelmingly Slavic genetically. So, the medieval Slavic migration created the genetic foundation of modern Poland. But what does Polish DNA actually look like today? In 2021, researchers published the 1,000 Polish Genomes project in the International Journal of Molecular Sciences, the most comprehensive look at modern Polish genetics ever conducted. The study analysed whole genomes from 1,222 Polish individuals and found something remarkable. The Polish population, which is homogeneous and sedentary in its nature, but influenced by many migrations of the past, is unique and could serve as a genetic reference for the Slavic nations. The first major finding, common variant analyses, showed that the Polish cohort is highly homogeneous and shares ancestry with other European populations. Poles are genetically one of the most uniform populations in Europe. In principal component analysis, virtually all POL samples, 1,065 out of 1,076, were clustered with other European ancestries. The study confirmed these results are consistent with the idea that the genetic composition of the populations from Central and Eastern Europe was shaped mostly by the steppe pastoralist migrations in the Bronze Age. Modern Poles carry substantial ancestry from Bronze Age corded Ware populations, which derived from Yamnaya steppe pastoralists, the same genetic foundation we discussed earlier. Modern Polish men carry Y chromosome haplogroups in these frequencies. R1a, 57.5%, dominant, the Slavic marker. I2a, 15 to 18%. R1b, 12 to 15%. I1, 3 to 5%. Other, 10 to 12%. The overwhelming dominance of R1a is the genetic signature of the Slavic expansion. As the 2023 study showed, R1a went from only 8.6% in Iron Age Poland to 57.5% in medieval Poland, a sevenfold increase. A 2013 study in the European Journal of Human Genetics by Rembauer et al., titled Contemporary Paternal Genetic Landscape of Polish and German Populations, found something surprising. Admixture estimates showed minor Slavic paternal ancestry, approximately 20%, in modern Eastern Germans and hardly detectable German paternal ancestry in Slavs neighbouring German populations for centuries. Despite Poland's geographical position between Germany and Eastern Europe, and despite centuries of German settlement in Western Poland, there's very little German genetic contribution to the Polish gene pool. The study noted that Sharp genetic discontinuity along the political border between Poland and Germany indisputably results from war-mediated resettlements and homogenization, referring to World War II population transfers. Modern Poles carry several distinctive genetic features. Height. Polish men average 177 to 178 centimeters, 5 feet 10 inches. Women 165 centimeters, 5 feet 5 inches. This height advantage traces to Bronze Age steppe ancestry. Lactose tolerance. Over 90 to 95% of ethnic Poles can digest milk in adulthood. A 2024 study found that the frequency of the European lactose tolerance associated allele 13.9, 10*T, correlates primarily with Yamnaya ancestry, and R1 are haplogroups dominant in Poland. Eye colour. Predominantly light, with blue eyes in 40 to 50% of Poles, green/hazel 20 to 25%, brown 25 to 35%. Hair colour. Ranges from blonde to dark brown, with most Poles having medium blonde to light brown hair. After examining thousands of years of genetic history, what have we learned about Polish identity? The DNA evidence is clear. Modern Poles are predominantly descended from Slavic migrants who arrived in the 6th to 8th centuries from the Ukraine-Belarus region. Over 80% of modern Polish ancestry comes from these medieval Slavic settlers. But the Slavs who migrated into Poland weren't pure anything. They themselves carried Bronze Age corded Ware ancestry, which in turn derived from earlier populations. Here's something remarkable. Despite the dramatic medieval population replacement, modern Poles are still genetically similar to the Bronze Age corded Ware populations that lived in Poland 4,000 to 5,000 years ago. Why? Because both the pre-Slavic Iron Age populations and the medieval slaves were ultimately descended from related Bronze Age groups. They had diverged for about 3,000 years, but they shared common Bronze Age corded Ware ancestry. Poland's turbulent history left surprisingly little genetic mark. The Mongol invasions? No detectable Central Asian contribution. The Swedish invasions? No Scandinavian genetic input. Even 123 years of partition by Russia, Prussia and Austria didn't alter the Polish gene pool. Even the legendary Jomsvikings, who maintained a Viking fortress on Polish soil for nearly a century, left no lasting genetic trace. They were absorbed, expelled, or simply overwhelmed by the demographic weight of the Slavic majority. This suggests that most invasions involved armies, not mass population movements. Occupying powers didn't significantly intermarry with Poles. Polish cultural identity maintained genetic boundaries. Population recovery after wars came from existing Polish populations. The genetic boundary between Poles and Germans is remarkably sharp, sharper than geography alone would predict. Poles maintained strong cultural boundaries even when political boundaries disappeared. Language, religion, Catholic Christianity, and cultural identity preserved the population even through 123 years of partitions when Poland literally didn't exist on the map. The story of Polish DNA is ultimately a story of transformation and continuity. Transformation: the medieval Slavic migration completely reshaped Poland's genetic landscape, replacing over 80% of the earlier population within 2 centuries. It was one of history's most dramatic population movements. Continuity: despite invasions, partitions and catastrophes, the Polish genetic profile has remained remarkably stable since the Middle Ages. No subsequent invasions significantly altered this genetic foundation. Modern Poles carry in their DNA the story of humanity's epic migrations. Neolithic farmers from the Middle East, Bronze Age, steppe herders from the Pontic Caspian region, and medieval Slavs, whose migration created the Polish nation. Every Pole carries genes from the first farmers who tamed wheat, from nomadic herders who domesticated the horse, and from Slavic migrants who gave Poland its language and cultural identity. Even the legendary Jomsvikings, those elite Viking warriors who once held a fortress on Polish shores, are part of this story. Not through genetics, but through the historical tapestry of Poland's past. The genetic secrets of Poland remind us that identity is layered, complex, and rooted in thousands of years of human movement and adaptation. The Poles understood something important. You can maintain your identity through culture, language, and collective memory even when empires try to erase you from the map. From the Bronze Age corded Ware peoples, through the mysterious Vielbach culture, past the legendary Jomsvikings, to the great Slavic migration that created modern Poland, the story written in Polish DNA is one of transformation, replacement, and ultimately remarkable continuity. DNA tells us where we came from, but culture tells us who we are. If you've enjoyed this video, then subscribe and like. Let me know in the comments what video should I make next.